The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. Good morning, I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, October 4th. This week's Newsies, NEPM reporter Karen Brown, April May Munford, a reporter with The Republican, and Matt Safransky, Western Mass Politics and Insight editor and founder. Welcome to all of you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Later in the show, our rundowners will dish on Governor Healey's use of executive power to enact a new gun law in Massachusetts, and we'll discuss additional details related to Hampden County Sheriff Nick Cocchi's recent drunk driving arrest. Send us your thoughts about that or anything that comes up in the show. Our email is therundown@nepm.org. Now, before we zoom in on Western Mass this morning, you may have been aware of the fact that Tuesday night there was a vice presidential candidate debate televised and over radio waves as well. NEPM held a nonpartisan watch party at White Lion Brewery in Amherst, but Matt Safransky, you opted not for beer but pizza at the watch party that was held by the Massachusetts Democratic Party in Boston's North End. What was the vibe there among the Dems who watched this debate?
I think that, for the most, it was a little bit different, obviously, from the presidential debate in that there was, sheer joy after the, Kamala Harris's performance. This time it was a little more muted, but not like necessarily in a bad way. It was just kind of like, okay, that went well enough. There'd been a lot of buildup. I think they very successfully managed expectations about maybe Tim Walz.
Well, they managed expectations by saying he was going to be terrible.
Exactly. And I think that they managed them well. But of course they were also very, happy, if in a kind of ironic way, about how the debate ended with, J.D. Vance refusing to acknowledge that Donald Trump lost the last election, and Tim Walz's response, which pretty universally was thought of as being his strongest moment with a possible competition with his abortion answer.
Overall, the GOP, I think, based on what I read after the debate, they were pleased with J.D. Vance, their presidential candidate's performance. They told ABC News, 6 different strategists who spoke with ABC News said they liked what they saw. They saw GOP VP candidate Vance largely stuck to the issues and veered away from topics that animate a wing of the GOP that's inflamed by the cultural battle du jour,
yeah, that's right.
But largely settled behind Trump this year. I didn't watch the debate. I decided to take a breather. I have been very dutifully watching all of this, but I think I'm just a bit dispirited. I read a piece in the New York Times on the 26th where they fact-checked 2 recent Harris and Trump stump speeches, and they looked at every falsehood, exaggeration, and untruth, and they picked them apart and explained them. The Times reporting found that in an hour-long speech from candidate Donald Trump, he made 64 statements that fell into those categories. In a 20-minute speech made by candidate Kamala Harris, 6 such statements. And I look at this as a person who has a 5-year-old son, right? And we teach our kids, you shouldn't be lying. You should be very accurate in what you do. That's what you should strive for as a human in the world. And so I just feel like I'm stuck right now on why we tolerate this at all from anyone in leadership. I'm hoping this mood clears by the election. Karen, go ahead.
Well, I just have some sympathy for not watching the debate because even though I am a reporter, I am primarily, a local feature reporter. So I get really anxious about these national things. And in fact, even though we all have to cover the elections, of course, every year, I always ask to be on the daytime so that I can do the exit polling. Because if you get me in the evening when all of the performance stuff goes on, it's just so nerve-wracking.
I appreciate that strategy and wish that I had happened upon it when I was doing beat reporting. Well, I'll move us on to news closer to home. Governor Maura Healey on Wednesday implemented a gun reform law that was set to go into effect October 23rd. Now, some of you might be thinking, who cares about a law going into effect a couple of weeks early? Or, hey, government did something ahead of time on schedule, for once. But this executive action was a big deal for opponents of this law who appeared to be on the verge of successfully completing a grassroots campaign to suspend it. Here's what Cape Gunworks owner Toby Leary said.
And the fact that she's going to circumvent the constitutional process and the will of the people is the move of a tyrant.
tyrant, Toby Leary says. So perhaps monocrat Mora bumper stickers forthcoming. We'll see from the GOP on that one, or just gun supporters in general. But more to the point, Matt, Healey told reporters this week that she made the right move at the right time. Your thoughts, did Healey go too far using this executive action?
Well, I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that we're talking about an issue that's like, I mean, it's 70-30 nationally. It's probably like 85-15 in Massachusetts. There's just simply not going to be any popular opposition to this process. If there's if there's a constitutional quirk in there that is important, then the courts will settle it out, obviously. But I mean, to have somebody talk about the governor being a tyrant for fixing several gun laws, that I believe this is some of the leftovers from recent Supreme Court cases, just kind of like harmonizing everything to make sure our laws still work. There's just nobody's going to win an election on that basis in Massachusetts, and I don't think anybody's going to be freaking out on a level that was going to cause the legislature or the governor to think twice outside of this group of people that have their position, and they'll have their voices heard eventually.
And opponents wanted to bring it to the ballot in 2026.
Which they will. It still will go to the ballot, I believe.
But they were hopeful that by gathering enough signatures, and it seems like they were, based on reporting, that they were pretty close, that they could have at least suspended this law for 2 years, and then the people come in and vote on it in 2026. A few details on this law, and it is broad. It expanded a few red flag laws, requires applicants for gun license to complete live fire training, and bans everyone but police from bringing guns to schools, voting places, and government buildings. And the immediate start to some of these restrictions, opponents were saying they're concerned about the impact on business. Toby Leary said, quote, "It's like telling Subaru that they can no longer sell a Subaru Forester, the best-selling vehicle in their lineup." And he's speaking specifically there to this restriction on so-called long guns. Meanwhile, supporters are rejoicing this week. They've touted this new law, I'm paraphrasing here, but just like bigger, beefier muscles on an already pretty tough gun law in Massachusetts here. April, I know that you reported in March when a shot was fired inside of Springfield High School. What have you heard on the issue of guns from community members since then?
I do know in Holyoke and in Springfield, they're trying to be stricter on gun laws and keeping offenders in jail if they have offended before or had a weapon possession before. I think we've seen firsthand what damage guns can do, and I think strengthening the laws was inevitable at some point in time. It's going to be interesting to see how voters react in 2026. Yeah,
which, as Matt points out, this will likely then be on the ballot. While in the short term, Maura Healey may have been successful in blocking opponents' hope for how they wanted to circumvent this. They may have the say again there in 2026. And I was looking back at some stats relative to Western Massachusetts. March 2021 in Springfield, six shot in 6 days. August 2023, Representative Bud Williams called on Governor Healey to increase state police coverage amid an uptick in homicides in Springfield. And I'm not trying to zoom in just on Springfield. Obviously, this is a problem in areas across Western Massachusetts and this country. Karen Brown.
Well, I live in the Upper Valley, where it's probably more like 95 to 5% in terms of supporting reasonable gun regulations, which I think most people consider this law to be. But, in terms of the delay, 2 years is long enough where maybe a life could be saved. I think that's probably how supporters of this are thinking. Right. So it's not just a matter of legislative delay. It could actually create some actual safety that will mean someone will not die by a gunshot. So I think it's important to keep that in there. And if it does nothing in 2 years, then that could support the other side when they put the ballot question out, although I doubt that.
It'll be interesting to keep watching. April, go ahead.
Recently, schools were threatened in Massachusetts, all across Massachusetts, so these laws, like I said, I feel like they're strengthening these laws are inevitable.
Matt, before we move on, I want to circle back to the law that's now in effect. The Globe reported that opponents of the law may challenge the emergency, may challenge portions of this. Do you think we might see that move from these folks anytime soon?
I think it's the big question is, are they going to have creditable arguments? I suppose likely that any attorneys that will be representing them are going to be largely in agreement with them, politically on this issue. So they might try to get a superior court or the SJC to pause it on that constitutional basis in terms of the signature gathering element. I'd also be looking to see if they're going to try to go the federal route as well and see if there's some way that they could shoehorn this into one of the recent Supreme Court decisions. My understanding is that this law was written with those decisions in mind, so it would have to be something that would move very quickly up to the Supreme Court, because the federal courts in Massachusetts and the federal circuit for Massachusetts are, more left-leaning than not.
And we've certainly seen the pro-gun organizations already sue over components of the law dealing with licensing and training. So more to watch here, obviously, on this issue. I'm going to move us on to some updates on reporting that we discussed in last week's show. This week, reporting by NEPM's Adam Frenier. The headline, the sheriff of Hampden County was suspended from his job after being arrested last month on a driving while intoxicated charge. Adam wrote that a spokesperson said that Sheriff Nick Cocchi served a 3-day suspension without pay after being arrested on a driving while intoxicated charge outside of MGM Springfield's casino. The state-owned vehicle Cocchi was driving lacked a tire and had a damaged rim. Sheriff's Department hasn't released repair costs, but the spokesperson said that the lost salary from the suspension, quote, more than covers the cost of the damage. I can hear some people saying, well, is that how, repairs or damages
and is that
supposed to work?
Is that the main issue here also?
What are you thinking, Karen?
Well, there's damage on the car, and there's the fact that someone was driving drunk in a way that could easily kill somebody. So I feel like there is some degree of diversion of attention that we're kind of missing a big point, which is this is a public safety issue.
April, I saw your hand go up.
I think we're still missing the fact that the tire was lost someplace, and we don't know where that place is. So there could be some property damage. There could have been something that happened, and that's a big question.
To April's point, the police report does indicates that the state police tried to figure out where the tire and the wheel were damaged, and they weren't able to do so. I mean, they didn't go all the way back to Springfield Country Club, but it was not in the immediate vicinity of the casino, based on my reading of the report. So this is an open question about what else was going on. And I think there's also a question that isn't being asked enough too, which is what other consequences could result from this? The Attorney General's office, more or less told me that there wasn't going to be any civil investigation into this as well beyond the criminal, and that maybe the Ethics Commission will do something. Of course, we won't know that unless and until the Ethics Commission actually makes a ruling.
And we've seen in reporting that it's the Police Officer Standards and Training Group that
Yep.
does have oversight over Sheriff Cocchi. Not the case for all sheriffs in the Commonwealth, but in Cocchi's case. So they may come in and say something. And I should say on balance here that when this went through court quickly last week, the sheriff was given a continuance without a guilty finding, and the charge will be dismissed so long as he stays out of trouble for a year. You mentioned the Attorney General, Matt. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell's office, told NEPM this week that they had sought a guilty verdict in the case and did not obviously prevail there. But we did also hear from 2 local defense attorneys who said, Cocchi didn't receive preferential treatment or a deal from prosecutors, that this is a relatively normal way that a case like this would make its way through the courts. Any other standing questions for people on this one?
Well, I think that's correct. I think that there's a tendency for people to focus on, did he get special treatment? And I think the answer is generally no. The question is more about, the provision of trust, or perhaps the potential, break of trust by, allowing this situation to happen. Potentially also the usage of a state vehicle, regardless of his intoxication. I think these are some questions that deserve some answers. I don't think that this is a thing that's likely to threaten him politically. I don't think there's going to be an uprising absent more information that's going to cause people to say he should resign. But I think that a lot of those answers should ultimately face the light of day.
In terms of him speaking to where he stood on this, he came out right after the arraignment and took responsibility. He said, quote, "In today's political life, so many people want to point fingers and push blame onto others. I wasn't brought up that way." Karen?
Well, I do think, though, that it's important to push back a little bit on his claims of transparency, because he didn't agree to a breathalyzer. He hasn't told the police where this damage happened. That's why we're having this discussion about it. He also said he had a couple beers. I mean, he's a large man, and I've had a couple beers, and I could probably still remember where I, had a car accident. So I feel like we're not getting all of the, I'm a reporter, and I'm always looking for information. So I just think it's important that transparency may or may not be given it.
April, quickly before we head to break.
And I think that that's what people are going to think about. I think that that's what voters are going to think about. I happen to think that, that trust that's broken is going to be what does it.
Well, this is an issue we will keep an eye on. We are going to take a quick break, but stay right here, because still to come on the rundown, 2 different efforts to improve lives and the community in Holyoke, and treasure tracked down in Wendell State Forest. This is the rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to The Rundown. I'm Carrie Saldo, here discussing the biggest news from the 413, April May Munford, Matt Safransky, and Karen Brown. Tell us what you think. The Rundown at nepm.org. April, let me start with you. You reported on a new venue in Holyoke for ROCA this week, and that's a program that helps at-risk youth. Where's the new home, and how is that location going to help them continue their work?
So the new home is on Ray Street in Holyoke. This program has been actually in operations for over 6 years. The new space is bigger, and what I think is they have a full kitchen, they can make meals, they have bigger opportunities for engagement circles, which when I was outside of ROCA seemed to be the big deal. Everyone was like, we got to do a circle. We got to get in there together. We got to do this thing together. And so I think that it's really important. It's safer there, and it's a more accessible location. So they have seen an uptick in youth coming into the program. So I think that's really important. One of the aims is to build a better relationship with the community and the Holyoke Police Department, and that's one of the ways they're doing it.
Yeah, and they're really working with teenagers and people in their early 20s, right, to try and help them, if they have had a problem with the law in the past, reintroduce them to society and find ways to be more productive members of the community. But also, my understanding from your reporting is to help people never get to that step, too.
Right. So they have this cognitive behavioral therapy. There's 7 steps in that, and it really helps with social emotional regulation when you're on the job, when you're out in the community, and it's been instrumental in rebooting, the core of people that may sometimes have been broken down in those urban at-risk or violent communities.
Another intervention program that you took a look at last month was with the Holyoke Police Department, their community policing, and the headline here, Baby Steps Toward Recovery, on the beat with Holyoke PD's outreach team. How did you learn about the work of this Ray Street program?
Of course, from the Holyoke Police Department spokesperson, we were doing
They said, hey, we're doing something good. Come on in here.
Yeah, we were looking at the Holyoke police reform, and, one of the things that came out of it was this Ray Street department, and a lot of people didn't really know what they did in this department, and so we wanted to go and see what it was all about. I went on a ride along, and we literally drove down the alleys and were in search of people who were most vulnerable and at risk. And they'll hi, how are you today? Again, seeking that connection and offering support services and help.
And oftentimes these are people who are maybe 24 or 48 hours away from a known overdose, right? Is what I read from you. Right.
And so they, there's a list, and they go and follow up with these people right where they're at. And it could be substance abuse, or it could be mental health services or supports that are right there on boots on the ground, basically.
And what really stuck out to me about this story is this aspect of kind of being at the right place in the right time. And it made me think of your past reporting, Karen. I went to the archives, found a piece from 2020 about drug addiction recovery team, the DART team at work in Ware, and they're work at several communities in Western Mass, but this one in Ware in particular. And it's a similar model to Apprell's where you're working with community members. But part of your reporting, you learned that researchers told you that it's really kind of hard to quantify the results of this type of outreach and working with people. Do you have any sense if that's still the case?
I mean, I'm sure that it's still the case because, you know, you can say if you just help one person, then that is all that you need. But we've got budgets that people are looking at and very limited time. So there's a lot of talk about how can you gauge whether it's worth it or not. I think many people feel like it's absolutely worth it because you don't know, but clearly it helps some people. But the problem is also that the drug supply keeps changing and the potency of the drug supply keeps changing. And you've got fentanyl and xylazine. So you can't really compare one year with another when what's on the street is different. It's just very hard to be quantitative about it.
Matt Safransky?
I just wanted to add, say something additionally about like the ROCA program and the intervention. I mean, these things do make a difference when they're properly executed and when they give kids something to do and somebody to connect with. It's just worth noting that as at the time that they were elected, both the mayor of Holyoke and City Councilor Izzy Rivera had said that they were frequent visitors of the Boys and Girls Club when they were growing up, and now they're leaders in their city. So, I mean, these programs can make a huge impact.
In addition, the Roca building is the former Boys Club.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, the mayor mentioned that.
So community connections all around. Okay, well, I am going to pivot us and add some whimsy to today's show. Ah, yes. I am the mother of a 5-year-old. Mystery solved. Skydrop Prize is found in Wendell State Forest, and this according to the Greenfield Recorder. But lots of media covering this because it was such a fun and interesting story. This reporting from Madison Schofield from the Recorder. 11 days after the hunt began for a 4-inch tall, 24-karat gold statue, an anonymous treasure hunter has claimed the Project Skydrop Prize hidden deep in Wendell State Forest. Project Skydrop began September 19th with a search for a diameter of 500 miles, encompassing every major city in the Northeast. Talk about a needle in a haystack, a golden one at that. And you could sign up for these online clues, and the circle kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it honed in and someone found it in Wendell. Did anybody strap on their hiking boots this week among the folks at the table?
I did not, but I was very anxious for the clues each day.
Did you pay the $20 to get them?
I did not, but I do know someone who did, and so I was very anxious to help them with the clues each day.
With $20 a subscription, you could get the clues a little earlier than other folks. And for those who were glued to the live stream, you would have seen that around 5:19, or exactly 5:19 on Tuesday, a pair of green and gray Adidas sneakers approached the statue created by New Hampshire game developer Jason Rohrer and his creative partner Tom Bailey. Now, John Flees, the co-owner of the market in Irving, which is located near the state forest, told the Recorder that he met the winner. The winner wants to remain anonymous. We'll see how long that happens because his face has been all over the place. I did try to use Google Lens because he said he was a meteorologist in Boston.
Oh, interesting.
It didn't work.
Yeah,
So
they don't let you do that anymore. They're on Google Lens.
it is a little creepy, right? Yeah. But I did try. To me, I love this story because it speaks about the importance of hyper-local journalism, right? We had the Recorder cracked the story about there was a person who found it and we sort of identified him, but we had Mass Live and the Republican, the Berkshire Eagle, all with their various versions of where was it. Matt, what did you think about this sort of start for an online sleuth that turned to real-world treasure hunting?
Well, I mean, I think it's just an opportunity to, make a little bit more positive news for once, having something that's a little more fun. I mean, there's been a lot of, the risk of getting it too heavy is a lot of conversations about how there's negativity bias within a lot of news, and sometimes it's just, it is fun to have something that's a little bit different, a little bit more positive, but also not just straight up corny. Like, I mean, there are some positive news stories that, I don't want to say they're press releases, but they're sometimes just like, why is this even in front of me? And this is just something that had a little bit of, like you said, sleuthing, had a little bit of, really dig into it, and just some fun for everyone.
And the two men behind it really did put a lot of thought. I mean, they forged this little golden statuette, sort of looks like a little mini golden tornado. It was really beautiful. Apparently apparently the winner accidentally broke it on his way out. I also thought a really interesting aspect of this story is that the trophy is worth like $26,000 or something if you melt it down. He reportedly does not intend to melt it down, nor did he claim the $87,000 in prize money. He was just in this for the fun, he told people, which I just think is remarkable.
It's those kinds of surprises that make this a fun story. If it was just, because it's a bit of a manufactured story, but it really took off because there's something about not knowing how it's going to act, how it's going to come out, and just what are the motivations? What are the motivations of the people who started it? What's the motivation of this guy that doesn't need $26,000? I mean, maybe meteorologists get paid really well. There's extra stuff in addition to the fact that it was a bit of a sort of a media event manufactured as such.
And the fun doesn't have to be entirely over because the Berkshire Eagle said that the competition is continuing. There's a second place contest where you can guess the location. You have until October 10th. There's details on skydrop.com, which I've kind of been checking pretty religiously. And there's now a box, it appears to be, of some sort in the location where the Golden Trophy once was. So I'm curious to see what that is all about.
How curious. Are you going out this weekend?
I might strap on some hiking boots this weekend. We'll see. First time for Wendell State Forest. All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to our predictions, scoops, and praise portion of the show where we ask our panel to make a prediction about the news, spill the tea on a story that they're working on, or maybe heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. Matt Safransky, I'll start with you today.
So as a story that's been developing in the course of this week has been the removal of a historic bench from Stern Square in Springfield. And it does seem like the city is starting to explain what's happening, but obviously it's not the full story. I predict that we will learn a lot about the inner workings of the Parks Department and some decision-making processes around this particular bench, and also how this ultimately ties into homelessness. There's been some discussion about whether or not that was a factor in its removal, and we're going to therefore the other part of the prediction is we're going to have a conversation about homelessness in Springfield very soon.
Yeah, I missed that story, so I'm going to have to go and look it up. I appreciate that. Karen Brown, how about for you?
Well, I cover a lot about drug addiction, and I'm always looking for sort of new ways to shed light on how this country, this community can address this incredibly hard topic. And now I'm doing a story about scientists who are looking at squid and octopus for clues on how to reduce pain in a way that avoids opiates. So that's a few steps beyond, or outside of sort of addiction treatment. But I think it's relevant, and I also think it's fascinating.
Color me absolutely intrigued. So Squid Ink, perhaps, or
well, you're going to have to wait for my story.
Frau May Munford, how about for you?
So for Business Monday, I'm excited to talk about the Sublime Cement, zero carb cement that was first poured in one Boston Wharf this week. So this is the first decarb cement in the world, which is really cool because they're going to be making it in Holyoke. So big deal for the net zero goal of the state.
So eco-friendly cement. Huh.
Cool.
Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. I have praise this week for Springfield-based Merriam-Webster because they released nearly 200 new words and phrases into their online dictionary, which they do often, where they send out these sort of large swaths, and then we get to dissect and look at them and chitty-chat about it. But the one that caught my attention this week was touch grass. It's to participate in real-world activities instead of being mired in the online world. And didn't we do that this week with Project Skydrop? Or at least think about doing it? And I will fully admit, I had never heard of touch grass before, so that makes me feel like
now you got to do it.
Exactly. Well, my thanks to this week's panel, Matt Safransky, Karen Brown, and April May Munford. Remember, if you have a thought or comment for us, the rundown at nepm.org. Check out the stories we discussed on today's show page, nepm.org/the rundown. Our theme is by the Love Crumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op is Phil Bushup. And our digital support is from Ayu Suryawan. This is the rundown for October 4th. I'm Carrie Saldo. Have a great weekend.